Welcome to the Plot Point Podcast with Leslie Z.
And I'm Sarah D.
We serve distilled interviews with some of the world's leading authors in just 20 minutes because we know you are busy and we are too. After all, we have books to write, cocktails to shake, and fabulous places to visit. Welcome, Wally.
I'm very happy to be here.
What was your journey to get that first book published?
When our first kid was born, it was the day he was born after being up, for most of the night in the delivery room with my wife. And I went home and I was going to grab a shower and then, call the relatives and the friends and stuff. And I had no ambition to write a novel or fiction of any kind. And while I was in the shower, I heard a voice. And it was a woman who said, well, the dork just left me. Good riddance. And I didn't know what it was, but I had the instinct to write it down on a piece of paper, and I forgot about this thing for about a month. And then when I found it, I just got curious about who that might be, and I sat down, and that's when I started writing fiction. I wrote. It was a short story, I thought, and then I sort of slammed into the wall of all that I didn't know about how to write fiction. I applied for and was accepted in a low residency Master of Fine Arts program at Vermont College. I went there. I was scared to death because I thought, oh, everybody there is going to know, more than me. I realized that it was going to take me 9 years to do. I would have probably run out of the room screaming. But sometimes ignorance can service you. And so I just kept plugging away at it. And I'm not one of the writers who can outline a story and know when they start it, how it's going to end, and so forth. I just have to keep showing up at the legal pad or the laptop and see what's going to happen next. I also write first person. I don't think I could write any other way. What's really interesting for me is to crawl out of my own skin and become somebody else. One of the things that's great about that is that I write myself into things that I don't know about necessarily, and so I have to research. But when I'm finally emerged from the story, I've managed to move past my own limited experiences and learn about other people in the world. I have in one of my file cabinets, I have a folder that's about as thick as maybe not a New York phone book back when we all had phone books, but it's pretty thick and it's full of rejections. When She's Come Undone was first published, that was my first novel, and as I said, it took me about 9 years to write it, and it was published 4th of July weekend of 1992. I get a call, and my son calls me to the phone, and this woman says, is this Wally? And I said, yes. And she said, what are you doing, Wally? And I said, well, I'm doing laundry, actually. And she laughed, and I'm thinking to myself, whoever the hell this is, I don't think she does her own laundry. Anyway, I said, who's this? And she said, oh, this is Oprah Winfrey. And I'm thinking to myself, right, you're Oprah, and I'm Geraldo Rivera, There was no Oprah book club. She said, reading saved me when I was a kid because I didn't have a very happy childhood. And so I like to escape with books. And she said, I read She's Come Undone, You Owe Me 2 Nights Sleep. When she starts the book club, I certainly didn't think that she would remember, because she started that in 1997, I think. And, I had no fantasies that she would, remember my book from 5 years ago, but she did. And so it went from like this nice little, modest success, but, it was sat up there on the top of the bestseller list in 1997. And then the following year, I finished I Know This Much Is True, and she called again. And then earlier this year, she called a third time. Because I had a wide readership now and people were waiting for me to finish a book, I got scared. I got what did that call? What do they call that? Imposter syndrome. And I thought, okay, now they're really going to find me out. I really struggled, and I began to drink over it, and so it was not a happy time for me. And then finally, one day, the muse finally gave me a break, and I started on something.
What do you do when you're stuck? Do you ask for guidance? Did you say to the voice that you had heard, "Who are you? What do you want to tell me?" Do you have a communication with them? Do you just sit there and allow yourself to sort of open? What is that relationship you have to this muse?
In the city while we were in New Orleans. I went down to the St. Louis Cathedral in the square, and I lit a candle and I got on my knees and I prayed, please, can I find a story? And very shortly after that, the story began to find me. So
When there's a struggle or the story's not coming, do you still sit and write every day? Do you?
yeah, yeah, I do. And sometimes, when I was a kid, I didn't particularly like to write. I mean, I did homework and stuff, but what I loved to do when I was a kid was draw. I was always drawing. I did my own cartoons and comic books and stuff like that. And so sometimes when I get stuck, I will try to draw my way out of it. And if that doesn't work, to get back to the shower, um, I will try to get somewhere where I can hear running water. So there's something about the sound of water that's moving that kind of it makes things flow for me.
So the water and the river, obviously, in your latest, what is the river about to Corby in the book or to the reader? Is it the
Mhm.
freedom?
Yeah, it's kind of like, trying to solve the problem of his life. He uh he plays in a brook or goes to a brook when his verbally abusive father is on a tear, and when the terrible accident happens, and he's not sure what to do. He goes to the river, and he confronts a great blue heron, who is sort of staring back at him, and so I think those are, he's looking for answers. He's looking for, and then when he goes to prison, he can, if it, the prison is noisy, and after everybody kind of goes to bed, it quiets down a little bit, and only then, when everybody else is asleep, can he hear the river. He hasn't seen the river for most of the 3 years that he's in prison, but he can hear it, and of course, at the end, the river is very important.
Talking about this, the incident that happens at the beginning of the book, is that incident what's motivated or started this story for you? I mean, what was the choice for this book and that incident, which was so brave and so raw and so rough, but just, kills you?
Yeah. Well, it killed me when I came across an article in the newspaper, and it was about back over accidents. And usually there's a young child, who the adult, lots of times a parent, doesn't realize is behind the car. And lots of times it's a back over, a back up and a back over. I wanted to take that on. I also was afraid to take it on. And at the time, our son Jared had he had a brand new baby. And, I kept picturing it, what would happen if something like, this occurred, I kept being haunted by these accidents. I had just finished off a 20-year stint working with incarcerated women in Connecticut. And, I taught them some stuff about writing, and they taught me about life. And they would write about their history. Some little by little over 20 years, I was getting quite an education in um, what brings you to prison, and also what happens to you when you get there. So men's prisons and women's prisons are, there's a lot of differences, but there are a lot of similarities too in the structure, and being treated like sheep, and having your voice taken away. And I had a drinking problem when I couldn't come up with my third novel after some struggle. So I eventually got into a 12-step program and straightened myself out, and straightened out my life, and I think my career as well. Um, and so I've been sober, a number of years now. But I had that addiction piece that Corby has too. He's too reliant on the benzos, which was not my problem, but also he's drinking during the day and hiding it from his wife.
Wally, what you said about imposter syndrome is so deeply relatable to so many of us. And it's, as writers or creatives, we of course hope and seek that our work will be recognized and will resonate with readers. And we also worry about how the work will be received. And if we are lucky enough to have great success, I can only imagine the crushing pressure of it. How do you navigate that now?
I take years to write a novel, and I work hard at it. I work every day. And then, I'm in a writers group, so I get lots of feedback, and I give lots of feedback and so forth. And it's mine as long as I'm working on it, but it doesn't belong to me when it's published. It belongs to whoever, chooses to read it. And really, whether they hated the book or loved the book, that's their right. I don't, I don't, it's not my right to control their opinion. So I've kind of let go of all that.
When you're writing, this book in particular, there's so much pain, and there's painful scenes. But how do you know, because you do this, to give your readers, excuse me, your audience a break? There'll be humor in there, or there'll be some hope. Are you consciously crafting that?
I try not to think about or worry about who is going to be on the receiving end of it. I'm writing it as authentically as I can. But if I do that, and see, that's what really screwed me up with that third novel, because I was worried. I didn't want to disappoint my readers. And so I was trying to write for them instead of for myself. And when I started, I did, and so I had to relearn why I write, and not worry about material success.
What would you, at this point in your career, tell Wally sitting there collecting his rejection letters, if you could, or that might also help our other writers who are still collecting their rejections and have yet to have their big break?
But the first thing I would say is, um, chase out of your head any kind of fantasy about writing a bestseller. And write it because you care about the story. Write about it because you have this character who you can't help but follow. And then secondly, I would say, uh, get as much feedback while you're in the process as you can, and listen to people. Doesn't mean you have to take everybody's suggestions, but listen open-mindedly. I've been in a writers group ever since I graduated from Vermont College and that writing program. And I'll sit there when I'm presenting some work, new work, or revision for our group. I once I read it aloud, and they're reading it with copies too. But then I shut up. Not everybody does. Some people, jump in and want to correct something that somebody's just said. But I sit there and furiously, I'm writing notes about what everybody says, and whether I feel like I agree with what they're saying or not, I need a record of it, because lots of times I'll have a reaction like, "Oh yeah, okay, what do you know?" And then the next day when I'm reading over the notes, or when things have cooled down a little bit, I realize that that's exactly what I needed to hear. And so, revision, I love revision. Some writers don't like it, but I know that my first draft is far from, good enough. And really, just to debunk, you know, what revision is, it's really one combination of four strategies. What can I add that's going to make it better? What can I cut out that is going to make it better? What what's not clear yet? What do I need to clarify? And the fourth strategy is, okay, how about if I cut and paste some? So, reorder some of the stuff that's already there. So add, cut, clarify, and reorder. That's
I
Mhm.
love books that both that have that moment where you pause and marvel over a beautifully crafted sentence. And that's something that Leslie and I talk about a lot, about how there's a lot of pressure right now in the publishing industry to churn books out. And Leslie and I always joke that it's like Skittles.
Yes,
But
Skittles.
when someone has taken the time to let the work ripen and deepen and marinate, there is a level of appreciation that I have for that as a reader, where I can really allow that to settle into my bones, and to just, I'll pause and reread it several. And you actually talked about feelings and facts, and how I'd like to ask you about that, because you said, that men tend to read nonfiction, and women more fiction. More fiction is read by more female readers, nonfiction is read by more male readers. And you said something that I have thought about many, many, many times in the last 6 months. You said, I think that's because men are more comfortable with facts.
If I'm more empathetic than a lot of dudes, I think that comes from teaching and from exploring these made up lives that I cook up. And I do feel that every once in a while, a guy will come up to me and say, at the gym or something, and say, my wife bought your book and I started reading it, and then I couldn't stop reading it. And I never read novels. And I'm delighted when that happens, because I think there's a lot of gifts to be had if guys will break through, the stereotypes.
Um, I wanted to ask the ending of what
The
happens, yeah,
yeah.
to Corby in hindsight, it seemed inevitable, and yet it still surprised me. Was that the ending that you envisioned for him, or where along in your process did that become his ending?
And what happened was I started that book, I think, in 2017. And at the time, there was no pandemic. And so I wouldn't have thought to write, a fictional pandemic and so forth. But then as the years, evolved, and I would be in touch with some of the prisoners that I knew, it was a terrible and very scary time, because there are a lot of COs, correctional officers, who I would say maybe less than 50% have some compassion. Some of the correctional officers just sort of see it as something I show up and do, and then when I get home, I don't want to think about it. And then there's this third group that should not be in power over these prisoners. A lot of the guys back in 21, 22, when those protocols started coming out, and guards, correctional officers were required to wear masks. a lot of them just sort of blew through that, and they had the mask that was in their back pocket, and of course, unlike the people who are incarcerated, they don't get to leave at the end of the day or go out into the world and then come back. But of course, the correctional officers, they do, and lots of times if they weren't wearing masks, and taking precautions, lots of times they would bring COVID back into the prison. I couldn't ignore the reality. I mean, I was writing about contemporary America during those years, and I couldn't not deal with that.
Ugh. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate you so much, and it has been just so wonderful to spend time with you. Leslie, do you have any more questions for Wally?
I
We could sit
don't.
here-
I think
we could talk for
I know
hours.
we could talk about every character, every book, but your writing is so moving. You're a lovely person, and
Thank
you
you.
know,
Thank you.
you deserve your success.
I'm gonna send that right back to you too, because I do a lot of interviews. I've done, just off the road from having done many, many interviews with this book. And I love the fact that you were not just focusing on this one book, and also that you weren't focusing, like a lot of times the questions are predictable, do you write with a pen or on a computer, that kind of thing. And oh, I thought, another one that I hear all the time is like, I couldn't believe I kept having to look at the back of the jacket because I couldn't believe that a man could write "She's Come Undone." It's like, yeah, I've heard that one about 8 billion times. Thank you. And but anyway, your questions, there was a freshness to this interview that I really appreciate.
Day made, Wally Lamb. We keep it
Exactly.
fresh. Leslie Zemeckis.
We gotta monetize this.
Yeah. 2 thumbs up, one for each of you.
Back at you.
Wally,
Thank
this
you.
is delightful. Thank you so much. And we look forward to continuing the conversation on the page and off.
And I will be one of those fans that is like, can you hurry and go write your next one? I know you can't, but I do want the next one.
Yeah, I am in the middle of the next one. I have a
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this was fun. I appreciate it.
Great.
Take care.
Bye, everybody. And thank you to you, our listeners. We are
Leslie Z
and Sarah D. And we will be back next time with another episode of the Plot Point Podcast, where we interview the best of the best. Until then, we have books to write, cocktails to shake, and fabulous places to be. And remember, writing is the best revenge.